So, Fable and the new Dragon Age trailers. I wanted to talk about both of these games a bit, and specifically the trailers we saw at the Xbox showcase. And I thought it would make sense to put these two together so you can see the dichotomy between the two trailers and most likely between the two developers. There's something different about developing a game for a series you didn't create, which is what the Fable team is doing. And to an extent, I guess you could say that the Bioware team is doing the same thing, because the reality is that the Bioware that we have now is a very different team than the ones that made Dragon Age Inquisition, and even more so than the ones who made Origins, though there are still members of that team at the studio. So how is it that the Fable team did such an excellent job of nailing the feeling of a Fable game, and the Dragon Age team completely failed? This is made even more odd by the fact that Bioware has an entire demo of their gameplay. But they didn't show that at the Xbox showcase. They didn't show any gameplay. Instead, they showed this horrible trailer. And here's the problem. This is the same problem that is plaguing a lot of other game companies, like, for example, Bethesda, though that they've done better at showing off their games. Bioware. We're talking person to person, just you and me now. You do not have the goodwill of your fans right now. This is not post Mass Effect 2. This is not the time right after Dragon Age Origins. If you had that goodwill, it would be much easier to be okay with a relatively poor showing, like not that great of a trailer, but you do not have it right now. So, what happened with this trailer? It's hard to say, really. There's so many different things that could have happened. They could have outsourced this particular trailer for all we know. Maybe this is the only version of the trailer that EA would greenlight. What we do know is that the Dragon Age trailer did not look like Dragon Age at all. If you had told me this is an entirely new IP, I would have been completely convinced by that. If you told me this was a new hero shooter, I would not have been surprised. I feel like this is the effect of a long-term relationship with EA. They are well known for destroying great studios, and you won't have to look far to see the trail of destruction that they have laid through the game industry. There's some really fun graphics out there of that. But for me, and probably for a lot of other people out there, this one hits a little bit different. Then we go back, we look at what Fable is doing, and I'm frankly in awe a little bit. The tone is done with such reverence for the source material, even harkening back to the fan from earlier Fable games.
You are like literally my favorite person.
The random guy that's such a big fan of you. And being shown actual gameplay, I feel like that is something that those marketing people at Dragon Age somehow don't comprehend, though they've surely been marketing games for a long time. The easiest way to get people on board is to show that the game is something we would want to play, and do that as soon as possible and as much as possible. I could have forgiven the horribly generic tone-deaf trailer that we were shown if you then immediately followed it up with actual gameplay that looks like a Dragon Age game. I'd still be worried. Don't get me wrong, because it was so off the mark, but at least I'd have something to cling onto. Then we hop back. The Fable trailer, by contrast, is unique, specifically tailored towards people that played Fable. And don't forget, this is not only not the team that originally created Fable, but this is also a team that has not done a game in the RPG genre at all. They've been making Forza Horizon for over a decade, which has had a great reception, but making the jump to something entirely new like this is incredibly difficult. And now we go back to Bioware, who have a history in the RPG genre that spans all the way back to the 90s. And what do we see? A complete lack of understanding and a lack of respect for the source material. I really don't understand how that happens. It's incredibly tone-deaf. Even some of the most hardcore of Bioware fans who want more than anything for the game to be great have nothing good to say about this trailer. And here's the reality. You can't come off from a failure as massive as Anthem with this. What are they expecting this to do? Are they trying to appeal to a larger audience? Are they trying to appeal to fans of Overwatch or Fortnite? The messaging is just completely bizarre. If Dragon Age fails, you risk torpedoing your entire company, not only the developers of this game, but also the other team that is working on Mass Effect, because I assume they're the same development company. So that surely means you have to nail your presentation, right? There had to be people that ran through this presentation, approved it, and let it go through, and not only the Bioware team. Surely it had to run through an entirely gauntlet of people before it came out into the world, and nobody stopped it before they released it? It's honestly mind-boggling. I just don't get it, especially when you have a gameplay demo that you showed off. And it looks pretty good, actually. I did not think that you could top Mass Effect Andromeda in terms of a poor showing, and I actually liked Mass Effect Andromeda, but I can acknowledge it had a major optics problem, those being bad enough to completely shut down the studio that created it. And yet, here we are, many years later, with similar optics issues, maybe even worse. Fable, on the other hand, does the complete opposite. I would not have been surprised if the marketing for Fable had been fairly mediocre. They haven't been in that part of the industry yet, this genre, but somehow it hit exactly how it needed to. The problem is tone. The problem is identity, and a deep-seated understanding of your IP. It isn't hard to understand what people want out of a Dragon Age game, or a Fable game for that matter. Dragon Age is supposed to be dark fantasy. It's a medieval world full of complex themes, conflict between different races, conflict between those who can use magic and those who don't. There are things touching on big themes like discrimination. We have a perfect example of how to do a lot of these themes well, not only in their own series with Dragon Age Origins, some of the other Dragon Age games, but a more recent example in Baldur's Gate 3. Again, that they missed the mark to this extent is very bizarre, especially when you consider they do have gameplay that they could show, and the gameplay has a completely different tone than the trailer, and actually looks good. It looks much more on par with what a Dragon Age game is. It's mistake after mistake with Bioware. Clearly, they need to change whoever is on their team that allowed this to happen. First impressions are incredibly important to the success of your game. There are so many more eyes on a big showcase than there is on a random trailer. And you're not getting those because of this. This is something that isn't particularly new either. It's a mistake many different game companies make. To greater and lesser extent, it can be very confusing and cause people to not play games when they come out, even if they're so much better than they're showing is in trailers and stuff. I would definitely understand if someone decided not to play Dragon Age because of what they saw in that Xbox showcase. For me, I've seen enough of the gameplay and it still seems interesting enough. In fact, it seems pretty great. I personally, I like this new action combat that they showed off. The problem is, if they don't nail it, this could be the last Bioware game I play, and that's very sad for me, because I've loved the studio for a long time. So, cries of Bioware is dead, even my own that I had for a little while after I saw that first trailer, they may be a bit premature. Maybe. And it definitely, with what we've seen now, seems like it could be. But I guess we will soon see. I want them to succeed so bad. I really love, I cannot emphasize that enough. They're one of my favorite studios of all time. But I refuse to get my hopes up. I suggest you put your hype hat away too. Thanks for watching.